What's going on, retro gaming fans, and welcome back to another episode from Rehab Gaming. So what we have here is a copy of Virtual Pinball for the SEGA Genesis console, and there's something about this game cartridge that I wasn't actually aware of, and I'm pretty sure you'd be interested in figuring out as well. So stay tuned, and we'll get right at it. Alrighty, so I recently got this copy of Virtual Pinball for my collection. It came complete in box with all the manuals and everything, and I took the game out of the box and was taking it apart to clean it up just for some preventative maintenance for storage, and I figured out that this game actually has something on the inside that I didn't expect to be there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and tear this thing apart, and I'm going to show you exactly what I found. So for starters, on these game cartridges, the first thing you need to do is to take out this yellow clip on the side. The taller game cartridges have this yellow clip, and there are two clips on the front and the back right down in here that need to be disengaged so this entire yellow piece will slide off. So we're going to go ahead and get that taken care of and pull it off of there. Now, in order to get the yellow clip off, what I like to use is a small flathead screwdriver. Just kind of stick it in here. There is a little gap, as you can see right there, that you can fit a small precision flathead screwdriver in. And we're just going to gently push it in and gently kind of lift up on this yellow clip without damaging the plastic of the clip or the plastic of the game cartridge itself. And we'll just kind of wiggle it up, wiggle it back and forth, get it worked loose, move over to the back side, and do the same thing, just to try and get it pulled forward. Now, once you get to the point where the clips are ready to release, I like to switch over to a slightly larger flathead screwdriver so I can get a little more leverage on it and get this thing popped out of here. And then I just twist it until the back clips disengage and the front clips are right here on the edge, so I'll do the same thing. Those have disengaged, and you can slide this yellow piece, sorry about that, right off just like that. Now, in order to take the rest of this cartridge apart, just the same thing as a normal SEGA Genesis cartridge, flip it over to the backhand side, get your large game bit driver, and take out these two screws down here. We have our two screws taken out, so that means we can separate both halves of the cartridge. Go ahead and pull the back off, expose our main board down in here, pick it up and flip it over, and will you look at that. This game actually has a CR2032 coin cell battery soldered to the main board of the game. So that tells us that this game uses a SRAM chip to save game data on the cartridge itself, and we're going to go ahead and double check that battery just to see what the voltage of the battery is setting at currently. So we're going to go ahead and set this off to the side, grab our multimeter, get it up on our workspace, and see what kind of voltages we're working with on this battery. And if it's a little low, we're going to go ahead and replace it, especially since I don't plan on taking this game cartridge apart anytime soon, other than this preventative maintenance that I'm going to do. So we'll go ahead and flip it over, grab our leads, stick it on the terminals, and it looks like we're getting 3.01 to 3.02 volts. That's not exactly too bad for these coin cell batteries. Now, where you start to get diminished performance from the SRAM chip saving game data, and where data starts to be corrupted because there's not enough voltage left on this battery, is about 2.9 to 2.8 volts. So we're going to go ahead and actually replace this coin cell battery with another CR2032 coin cell. So we've already determined that the negative lead is over here on the outside of the cart. The positive lead for the battery is going to be over here on towards the inside of the cartridge. Now, when you flip it over, don't get confused. There is a small positive sign right there on the circuit board, and it's showing that this side would be positive if you look at that. But actually, that designation is meant for this capacitor down here. So don't let that confuse you. If for some reason you have any questions about whether or not which side is your anode, which is positive side, or cathode, which is the negative side, double check and make sure with a multimeter, that way you don't get confused and install the battery the wrong way in. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and put some flux on here, get this battery desoldered from the board, and then solder in a new battery. Alrighty, so once you get the tabs desoldered from the board, make sure that the holes are completely clear, and then we'll go ahead and pull the battery through the front of this PCB. Now, if you have issues with trying to get the battery out, you can use your soldering iron and heat up those pads. There might be a small trace of solder left on that connection. So if you heat up the pad of the battery with the terminal as you're pulling it through, it'll come just right out of there. I wanted to try and show you what the tabs look like after you pull the battery out. See if we can get it focused in there. You see how there's a flat spot at the very top where solder was sitting on top of the circuit board? These batteries that go into these PCB boards actually have what's called a through hole for your battery connection, which means that on both the front and the back of your PCB, you actually have copper pads that the battery needs to be soldered to. So when you are melting the solder on the backhand side, the heat's going to transfer through, and like it did in my case, to the front, and you'll be able to pop the battery out fairly easily. However, use caution while you're doing this, because if you don't have your soldering iron hot enough, or if you don't have flux up on this side, you might run the risk of pulling off the top pads when you're heating from underneath. So in order to get the top solder off, you can use a little bit of solder wick, or just use a copious amount of flux in that area, transfer the heat all the way through up to the top side to where this top layer of solder is melted. That way you can easily pull off the battery without pulling off a pad. And also, thanks to our handy dandy PCB board designers who designed this cartridge, they actually did denote which leg was positive underneath the battery on the PCB board. Now, it really doesn't do us a whole heck of a lot of good if we're trying to figure out which is the anode and which is the cathode from the backside of the board, or while the battery is in place on the circuit board. But when you're replacing your battery, you have that stamping right there to let you know that your positive lead for the battery actually goes over to the right hand side, with the battery sliding in from the top down. When you're prepping your new battery to be installed into the game cartridge, if you look at this battery, you can see that this leg is actually closer to the center of the battery. That's actually going to be your negative lead for the battery that needs to go in right there. So on your new battery, most of the batteries that you get nowadays are going to have the tab that extends all the way out to the edge like this side does. So when you're prepping your battery to go back in, we'll see if we can get it to focus. Move that out of the way. So you see this negative lead and how I had to bend it in like a C fashion? You will actually have to bend your lead exactly like that, just to make sure that your battery pins will actually be at the proper spacing, so they will fit right down inside the board like that. Now it will be elevated off the board a little bit once you get soldered into place. The other battery was also elevated off the board, so this is not going to be an issue. So once you're sure that you got it set in the board and that the leads fit in the holes, you can go ahead and solder the battery back in place. So once you flow solder into the joint, what you want to do, make sure that your solder joints on the backhand side are nice and shiny. They have the nice ridge on them. Flip the board over, to the other side. Check down in here underneath the battery. It's extremely hard to see with the lighting and the angle of the board that you got to get it at. But make sure that you have solder on the top side of the PCB that flowed through the plated through hole that is securing the battery also on the top side of the board, and that it's fully connected to the top half of the trace. Now, if you have a little bit of the battery lead sticking through more so than what you're comfortable with, take a pair of flush cutters like this, go down to the top of the ridge on your solder joint and just click it off like that. And there you go. You have a nice even tab with the top of your solder joint. It's not higher than any of the rest of the pins on the board. And then this board is going to be ready to get cleaned up. Make sure you clean all the flux off with some isopropyl alcohol and a Q-tip. That way you're not letting it sit here on the PCB. Once you have your PCB all cleaned up and you're ready to install the board back into the cartridge, make sure you start with the bottom side of the cartridge, set your board in, and make sure that these posts are seated inside of your main board. Then you can take your top cover and drop it right on, rotate it back over, and put your 2 screws back in, and then slide this clip back in at the top of the cartridge. Now that we got our 2 screws in, make sure that when you're sticking the front clip in, that this windowed area with the marking is going to be facing forward, and it also matches the contour of the side of your cartridge, as you can see there. And there's nothing special about sticking this in. Just slide it into place, give it a nice firm push, making sure that the clips seat in, and then it clicks back into place. So that wraps it up for this project. Thanks for joining us today as we cracked open this copy of Virtual Pinball to discover that it had a coin cell battery on the inside that powers the SRAM chip and powers the circuit to save game data. If you enjoyed the video, please go ahead and hit the like button down below. Also, we did something a little different with this video. I'm actually using a wireless headset for my audio, and then I'm also using a USB Type-C cable that hooks up to a monitor so I can see exactly what you're seeing as we're going through the video. So if you liked these new additions and it seems like you're getting better video quality and audio, go ahead and let us know, and also drop a like, comment down below, say whether or not it worked better. If you like the other audio where we were using the ambient speaker for audio, go ahead and denote that in the comment section of the video. Also, don't forget we have our Facebook page where you can actually stop by, like our page, check out the groups that we're associated with in relation to retro gaming, and that'll be in the link down in the description. So without further ado, thank you for stopping by, and we hope you have a wonderful day.